Welcome, everybody. My name is Arthur Gauthier, and together with Anne-Claire, we are leading the ESSEC Philanthropy Chair. We are very happy to deal with the topic of blockchain and cryptocurrencies for philanthropy. As Anne-Claire said, this is, I would say, a groundbreaking topic in the field of philanthropy. It's a fairly new conversation that has started a few years ago only. What we find interesting in this topic is the fact that more and more non-profit and humanitarian organizations, some of them very well known, such as UNICEF, Oxfam, or the Red Cross, have started to accept donations in cryptocurrencies, such as Bitcoin, Ethereum, or Cardano. We will say a word about Cardano in a minute. Other startups or initiatives are trying to use the technology behind the cryptocurrencies, I mean the main technology, which is blockchain, to also find new ways to help beneficiaries in different parts of the world. So some of you may be familiar with blockchain. It is a decentralized storage technology in which individual records of transactions are securely linked together and stored. It's impossible to falsify, so it's potentially a great technology to facilitate transactions, investments, buying stuff, obviously, insurance contracts, but it can also be used to make sure that donations are targeted to the right people and can bypass, some problems that people have with transferring money and donations to beneficiaries. For instance, very high bank fees, long delays in terms of processing the donations, and sometimes government restrictions. So blockchain and cryptocurrencies are starting to be used in the philanthropic sphere, and I think this is an interesting phenomenon. To discuss, the advantages, but maybe also the pitfalls of using blockchain and crypto for philanthropy, we have two. I'm very happy to have two exceptional guests to discuss this question with us. First, we will listen to Eva Oberholzer. Eva is the Chief Growth Officer of Cardano Foundation. Some of you may know that Cardano is, I think today it's the third most traded cryptocurrency in the world, behind the very famous Bitcoin and Ethereum. Cardano has some particularities. Eva will talk about that, especially the fact that it's based on peer-reviewed scientific research, and it uses some very interesting processes to validate the transactions. Eva will talk about what Cardano and Cardano Foundation are, why use maybe a foundation as the key organization behind this cryptocurrency, and how can Cardano and other cryptocurrencies bring about some positive change in the world. So that will be Eva's presentation. We will have a Q&A after that, and then we will listen to Peter Howson, our second guest. Peter is a scholar, is a senior lecturer in the Northumbria University in Newcastle in the UK. And Peter is arguably one of the first scholars to have written about this specific topic of blockchain and cryptocurrencies for philanthropy. I really enjoyed reading Peter's work when I did some research to prepare this seminar. And Peter is also an expert in development and climate conservation. He will discuss how the introduction of these technologies introduce some trade-offs in the nonprofit sector. So we will have some, I think, very exciting presentations. I think I will stop here with my own introduction. I just wanted to thank also colleagues from ESSEC Business School who are here today. At ESSEC, we launched recently an initiative called MetaLab, which will increase research and teaching on key technological advances such as AI and also blockchain. And we will have a colleague, Professor Christoph Müller-Bloch, who's a blockchain specialist, joining the discussion. So thank you to all the ESSEC Business School colleagues. Thank you especially to all of you. I think we are more than 70 now, and I think new people are coming along. I will, before giving the floor to Eva, I think I will just launch a first quick poll in order to see the audience familiarity with the topic today. So you should see a poll pop up on your screen. We will give you a few seconds to answer. And the question is, how familiar are you with cryptocurrencies? So Bitcoin, Ethereum, Cardano. So please answer in a few seconds, and we will share the screen to show you responses in a few seconds. That's great. We have about 50 participants, maybe a few seconds more. Okay, thank you very much to those of you who answered. As you can see, well, that's great. We have a very diverse crowd. I expected that. We have, I would say, a third of people who often hear about cryptocurrencies, but consider themselves unfamiliar with the topic. Another third, quite familiar, did some research about it. And we have, more than 20% of experts, people who already own and trade cryptocurrencies, and a few people who don't know anything about them. But yeah, I would say a diverse audience. So the challenge for Eva and Peter is to accommodate these two audiences. So thanks a lot for answering the poll. And now I will invite Eva to take the floor. Eva, I think you can take over the slides now, and we're really looking forward to this conversation. You can see your screen, and whenever you're ready, Eva, you can go ahead.
Perfect. So can you hear me properly and see my screen?
Perfect.
Great. All right. So thank you very much for the kind introduction, Arthur, and thank you very much for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be here and to speak to you guys. It's definitely a bit of a challenge to find the right information level. As you know, if you work in a blockchain and crypto space, there are a lot of words that are only familiar to us used, and I will use them. I'm very sorry, but I'll try to explain them at least. And if you still have questions, just ask them in the Q&A session. So yes, I'm the Chief Growth Officer and a member of the management board at the Cardano Foundation. Cardano, as Arthur mentioned, we are a public and open source permissionless blockchain. The first idea of Cardano was basically shared and initiated in 2015 by Charles Hoskinson. He's also co-founder of Ethereum, which we call the second generation blockchain. And he saw several limitations on Ethereum, and which basically led him to found Cardano and initiate the idea behind Cardano. So what is our vision? Cardano is as mentioned, open platform. So what we aim to do is we provide an economic identity to those people, and we talk about billions, by providing them a decentralized application and managed identity, value, and governance. So what is very important to know that when we talk about cryptocurrencies and blockchain, it's not only about the cryptocurrency and about the trading part or the owning of the cryptocurrency, as you might all know. Often there is an entire system behind it, an entire technology, and that's called the blockchain technology. And what we are as Cardano, we are building a platform, a technology that hopefully will leverage all the points that Arthur just mentioned before. So what we aim to do is to offer a secure, transparent, and scalable template that is required to power a new financial and social infrastructure. Financial and social infrastructure is basically, we live already in a world that is very, very complex and has complex in dependencies and intermediaries, and we have many organizations who help us to gain trust, to help us solve complexity. And with blockchain, this system or this infrastructure can heavily be challenged. And I'm happy now to explain you a bit, what it is all behind. Just to come back to Cardano and who's behind Cardano, we have three major organizations. First of all, it's the Cardano Foundation, which I'm part of. We are mainly responsible to drive adoption and to look for partnership. Partnerships are especially important because we are basically the bridge builder between the old world or the institutionalized world to this new world, this new ecosystem based on blockchain. We are the nonprofit arm, and we act as the supervisory and educational body for the Cardano ecosystem. So we are the right hand, so to say, of the community, and make sure that the community, which is supposed to be the owner of this decentralized system, we make sure that they are enabled, and therefore we provide support and guide and foster its growth. Then we have input-output. I mentioned Charles Hoskinson as the head or the initial founder of Cardano. He's the CEO of input-output. Input-output, they are responsible for the code, for the technology. This is a huge organization, and their major focus is to build world-class blockchain engineering solutions. And with that, the first version of the Cardano blockchain, which we call Cardano 2020. And then we have a third company called Emurgo Ventures. They are the venture capitalist or the CV arm, which is responsible for fostering commercial application and also have more of a commercial focus on institutions that build and come into Cardano. So we talked about Cardano, and often it's not clear what is Cardano. So Cardano is the project, Cardano is the blockchain, but we also have a cryptocurrency. We call that native asset. The currency we have is called ADA. The ticker name, so if you're a trader, you might know it also under ADA, but in capital letters. Ada is named after the revolutionary 19th century programmer Ada Lovelace. She's globally known as one of the first programmers, and especially female programmers that existed. And she's also the daughter of Lord Byron. After Byron, we named our first, our first era of the roadmap, of the Cardano roadmap. So any users located anywhere in the world can use ADA as a secure exchange of value and a power utility on-chain. And I think that is a very important topic also when we talk about cryptocurrencies and blockchain. We hear from countries, especially recently, that ban cryptocurrency. And what is important to know that if you ban cryptocurrency, you automatically also ban blockchain or ban people for participating in a blockchain. So this is what is meant with the power utility on-chain. Like if you want to create an entirely new governance model, which is based which is decentralized, so owned by everyone who's participating, you have to make sure that the access rights, that the way of interacting, the power, etc., is managed in the right way, and that you have a strong governance model. And part of this governance model is, of course, the incentives you create. And in order to create incentives, you always need underlying values. And most recently, this value is somehow linked to also a financial benefit or other benefits. And that's why ADA is also important if you look at the blockchain as a whole and its governance system. And yeah, what I mean with that is that every ADA holder holds a stake in the Cardano network. And that stake is actually the portion of ADA they have, which allows them to use it to take part of the blockchain. So how are we aiming to become the new social and financial infrastructure going forward? So yeah, we lay a great focus on three major aspects. That was also Charles Hoskinson who said that he wants to learn or actually overcome the limitation he saw with Bitcoin and Ethereum. So first and second generation blockchains, and focus more on scalability, focus on sustainability, but also in a decentralization way, and on security. And that's why we lay a great emphasis on those three features. And at the same time, to become or to reach that, we also said, okay, what can we learn from the old world? And what we learn, and especially in research and academia, is that everything that got developed, it always had a long way until a solution got found, or a theory got first falsificated and verificated until a theory or a potential hypothesis is approved. And we aim to use the same logic in developing Cardano as well. So before we just started to develop something, we also use a peer review approach, where we work with universities and first develop scientific papers to see what works and what doesn't, and then start building on top of that. And having this peer review approach also means that we are very close to science, very close also to math. Our consensus algorithm is also based on game theory, etc. So if you want to translate a scientific language into code, into technology, you also need the right coding language. And that's why Cardano is based on Haskell, which is a super functional and very scientific close language. But of course, moving forward, we have now just launched our smart contract, and with them we have a new language that will come out, and we will become much less functional and also introduce new languages and become interoperable, as we call it, with other programming languages as well. But that's one of, I guess, the core value propositions of Cardano. And yes, at the end, we want to become the full stack solution for authentication, for an economic identity and value creation. And I guess with that, that's actually a direct link to where you guys work in, or what you cover in your area. So just to mention a bit of deployment, we had the different eras I was talking about. On the very bottom, you see the Byron era. That was the first era Cardano initiated there. It's about building the right infrastructure. ADA got created, and trading started with ADA, of course. And the major focus was really to create the basis infrastructure that will help us to develop the system of the future. Then the second era is Shelley. You see that as number one. The Shelley launch was happening last year in July. There it's about creating incentives for people to participate in the blockchain. That was what I was referring to before. It's the stake pools. Now I'm becoming technical. Stake pools got created. They are similar to the miners, you know, from maybe Bitcoin. Bitcoin uses a mining mechanisms to validate the different, or to create the different blocks, and enables this record that Arthur was explaining you to continue. And in our system, we use a proof of stake algorithm, which needs stake pool operators, as we call them, that validates the block. So it's not a mining, it's a validation. And therefore they use the stake in our currency ADA. They have to actually participate in this entire mechanism and make the blockchain run and operate. The next phase that we are currently in is around utility and building application on top of a blockchain. It's around metadata. I will come to that later. It's about also enabling multi-currency functionality. That means that other people and projects or companies can come to Cardano and build their own currency or token, as we call it. And then the smart contracts, they are very important. This is the additional functional layer that Ethereum actually introduced after the Bitcoin era, where transactions just take place, but you can also link them to conditions and make them more programmable, so to say. And yes, the next two eras that will come up are Basho and Voltaire. Basho is all around scalability. We look at how can we bring other programming languages, as I mentioned, in, connect to the existing blockchain ecosystem, create side chains, increase the, as we call it, the transaction speed, and enhancing overall the performance of the blockchain. And the last one is a very, very crucial one there. It's really around governance. How do you ensure a democratic system? How does a democratic system work? At the moment, I mentioned the three organizations, the Cardano Foundation, IO, and Emurgo. Going forward, as soon as like the Genesis keys, or as soon as the blockchain is developed, the power goes to everybody who is a participant in the blockchain. And therefore, you need certain rules and a governance model that clearly defines how the different actors act with each other, how they vote, how new projects or the treasury is going to be used, all those questions. I go now a bit into, I've become more technical. I will not go into all the details, but just to give you a bit of the reason why I'm doing it. It's directly linked to a philanthropic project or strategy or ecosystem that has now that got created through this new staking mechanism that we have on our blockchain. So if I'm talking about stakes, in order to participate to the Cardano blockchain, you need an amount of stake, an amount of ADA that needs to be locked. It's kind of a deposit in order to participate and like run a stake pool, for example, and validate blocks. And in a very easy way explained, the more ADA that is locked, the more likely it is that you are able to participate and validate a block and then get a reward as an incentive out of it. So it's a bit the similar principle then with the miners in Bitcoin, as I mentioned, but this doesn't use the power consumption that we know from blockchain from the former blockchains because of this stake mechanism, because value is locked and not mathematical questions and puzzles need to be solved. So this is the difference. And in these mechanisms, we have the so-called stake pool operators, which are the validators, but we also have the delegators, and that could be you. So if you are a person that owns ADA, for example, you can choose if you just want to keep them in your account, in your wallet, as we call it, or if you want to delegate it to a pool, which can use it to create blocks and make sure that the system continues, but also gets reward for that, and then gives you a proportion of the reward. And another proportion of the reward goes into the treasury, and some parts of the transaction fees goes into back into the system. And the stake pool operators themselves, they also keep a proportion of the rewards. I really hope I can bring it across a bit. And I probably go a bit more into, this is the model, how it's really working. So what has happened in the meanwhile with the stake pool operators, they, of course, they need to incentivize delegators, people like Ben, Ellie, Steph, or you and me who hold ADA to actually delegate to their pool. So what has happened is that they the first step was they create a lot of marketing and they probably are very well known in the community, and that's why Ben decides to delegate his ADA to them. But since the ecosystem was growing, the stake pool operators thought of new ways, and this entire mission-driven pool strategy became alive. And what is a mission-driven pool? So mission-driven pools, they call themselves mission-driven because they declare that an amount or a percentage of the rewards they get from validating those pools goes to charity organizations or goes to humanitarian projects or humanitarian work. And this is why at the moment we have 25,000 community members who participate in this initiative. We have over $1 billion value that is at the moment delegated to those pools, which gives you a bit of the dimension. I cannot say how big the reward is. We haven't calculated that, but it's immense. And we announced, for example, just in June this year, a partnership we do with Save the Children, and I will come to that later, who receives those delegations from several stake pools. And they're now looking into, okay, what can we do with the ADA that we received? And we launched, or we just communicated the partnership in June. And I think after 3 months, they got 30,000 ADA delegated. And we are at the moment at the $2, let's say $2.30 value. So now you can imagine what they received as a funding in just 3 months' time, which is a totally new way of generating funds. And so this is one part of the changes that we are seeing, or the goods that blockchain is creating. And this is just the part in the fundraising area. And when we talk about other benefits that blockchain can bring, it's that we create kind of new DeFi solution, decentralized finance solution for people that at the moment are excluded from our system, that don't have a bank account, don't have even a birth certificate. They cannot even prove their identity. So what we do, we create an economic identity for them. We have at the moment a project with Ethiopia where we put 4 million students on a blockchain and create a public record of their university degrees, but also school degrees. And this record is stored, this is immutable. The government is verifying it as the central source, but after that, that is stored and that cannot be taken from anyone because it's not on a paper, it's not in the system of the government itself, it's stored on the Cardano blockchain. And with that, we have several steps that, so as soon as you have an identity, you can use that identity for other things, for like your own data and managing your data. So for open analytics, for open payments, for lending and credit, but also for insurance, etc. So this is an entire new identity universe, and as we call it, economic identity, we can create, especially for people that don't have those systems we used to work super properly in Europe, and even probably are are hit by a crisis and have to leave their country, and even when they come back, they cannot really prove that this land belongs to them. When they are away, they cannot really prove who they are, etc. So this is another very interesting area that we are very, very engaged in. So I will quickly go a bit into like, what does that mean? So I mentioned the Save the Children work we do, or the collaboration. We had a workshop, and that's why we have those beautiful, beautiful designs. When this collaboration started, I mentioned it first, it was around, okay, how can we create a new income source for them through this new staking universe? But then the second part was, okay, let's look at the general problems they have, the key challenges they face at the moment, and see how blockchain can help. And they came with, blockchain collaboration is very tricky, also because it requires some sort of transactions, and not always there's a similar system. Or for cross-border payments, for example, sometimes they pay up to 20%, a 20% fee. We looked at the entire situation, the humanitarian situation with violence, and also birth registration, certification, child labor, nutrition, etc. And then the ID part, of course, and also what consequences this COVID had. And similar other challenges. And at the end, we said, okay, where we see fit for the blockchain technology in that particular case is, first of all, that we help with education, and that we help with building up more, or educating more people, and also children and students in technology and technological topics. Secondly, we said we help, what does it mean if you own a digital currency? How can it be used? But also, what are the hurdles? And they are unfortunately immense, because different systems have different laws. And with the major team we work with in Rwanda, for example, they cannot hold ADA at the moment. So at the moment we are holding it for them, but we're now trying to find solution that they are in the future able to hold it themselves. And it's not really to create an investment strategy out of it, but what the beauty about digitalized value is that you can trace it. You can trace it back to the project you're effectively spending it. And that's another area we look into. It's like the traceability of donations. That's always a challenge for NGOs and nonprofit organizations, that they like, how do we gain the trust of donors? And when you make this entire value chain transparent, every donor knows exactly what happens with his ADA and where is it effectively used. And when you cut that and transfer it into a fiat currency such as dollar, then the traceability is broken, and you can't really track anymore where the money flows. So that was the second area. Then the third area was also, and I think that's also here on this slide, was regarding the smart contracts, and how can we use smart contracts for any sorts of contracts they have. How do they distribute money to people that need it, and what contracts can there be created also amongst them, especially when we have the topic around microfinance. Smart contracts can help a lot. And then the last area was then also, okay, how can we provide an economic identity for refugees, or for people that don't have an identity or don't have a birth certificate? How can we enable that in other countries as well? So yes, this is a bit the journey we are currently in with Save the Children, but there are many other projects or institutions that we look at, and we first look at their problems and then think of, okay, how can technology solve this problem? Another really nice example that we have is a recent challenge that we've launched. It's a restoration project we run with Veritree. And Veritree is actually a provider which stores the data, which plants tree and helps you to verify tree planting. And we have at the moment, we also looked at their challenges as an NGO, and they have as a similar lack of funds, lack of traceability and transparency, and also lack of like marketing or branding power sometimes, because it's not always the most exciting thing they talk about, or they don't have the resources internally to know how to talk about it. And we now just in September, end of September, we have launched the first Cardano impact channel. So we work with Veritree to do the land registration, which means also all the data of every tree that got planted will be stored on the blockchain. So it's immutable. We use our metadata functionality to store the data, and like this, hopefully also attract other companies, especially now it's a very trending topic that that companies try to become carbon neutral or have a social responsibility strategy, and therefore look into projects like in reforestation, for example, or carbon reduction. And this is a very nice way, or Veritree offers a very nice way to do that. And with our community, which is 1 million of people coming together and standing behind Cardano, we created this challenge where you can donate 1 ADA for 1 tree that got planted, and for that you receive an verification token that is kind of a reward in another way that you can also store on your wallet. And at the moment, I think we have planted around 340 something thousand trees, and they will all be planted in Madagascar. It's mangrove trees, and the goal is to reach 1 million. So anybody who has or who owns ADA, very welcome to go to the website, to the Veritree web page, and plant your own trees. So that was it from my side.
Thank you so much, Eva, for covering all this ground in such a short time. It was really, it was a great journey and introduction to our topic today. I thought it was good to clarify the difference between Cardano as a overarching system and project, from the cryptocurrency, which is ADA, which is only part of the system. And I think it was very interesting to see what you're trying to do in terms of financial inclusion, more broadly, and not only, donations to charitable organizations or beneficiaries. So I think it was an inspiring and at times technical, obviously, presentation, but I think it was great to give us this huge overview of what Cardano has been doing and is striving to do in the future. So thanks a lot for that. We have a few minutes for clarification questions. Obviously, we will have a bit more time after Peter's presentation, but I just wanted to offer the possibility to ask a few questions. So I think a few people used the chat to do that. You can also raise your hand if you have a specific question. I would like to ask, I think my colleague Christophe Müller-Bloch is here. Christophe, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, Christophe. So Christophe, as I mentioned, is a colleague, a professor at the ESSEC Business School. And I invited Christophe to come on board and to maybe ask the first question to open the discussion. So Christophe, do you have a question for Eva?
I do, and thank you very much, Arthur, and thank you very much, Eva, for your presentation. That was really interesting and informative. I do have a lot of questions, but I'll just start with one. I don't want to take all the space. And one thing that really interests me is that if you want to effectively use blockchain for many purposes, but among others also for charity, it's really necessary to not only collaborate with NGOs, but also regulators, right? For instance, to enable cross-border donations. And you've already mentioned that cryptocurrencies come increasingly under pressure, under regulatory pressure, for instance, in China. And what would be really interesting to hear more about is how Cardano works with regulators to ensure it maintains governmental support, or perhaps is Cardano, like some other blockchains, also in some way, to put it perhaps somewhat provocatively, working against governments, right? And for instance, when certain positions are not really reconcilable, which is really interesting to hear more about this. Thank you.
Sure. So we work very closely with regulators, of course, because you mentioned it correctly, Christoph. We usually in a perfect environment, regulation drives innovation. And we are a bit in the situation that we work in a field which is like every day news come out or other projects get announced, and it's so dynamic. It's also for regulators, there's no chance to really keep track. And I think the major challenge for regulators is at the moment to create an enough broad but still decisive framework for such projects to operate in. And also maybe don't try to just look at the old world and try to introduce everything into this new world, because the governance, it's really a new world. I talked about decentralized governance system, digital currencies. If you also look into the hype a blockchain is created, actually everything is traceable. It's cryptographically secured. You just see the code, but you see everything that happened on a blockchain. So when we talk about KYC, that is a very important topic for regulators. So know your customer, or money laundering, etc. Those are the major topics and fears when around cryptocurrencies. And I think it's very important for them to look at the features of a blockchain and understand the technology and able to, in order to be able to create the regulatory framework around it. And that's what we try to do. First of all, we try to talk to them and educate them and show them the technology. And then the second part is that still also with the work we do with Save the Children, for example, they're very close to the Rwandan government, and they're super innovative and open to talk. And with them, for example, we can already show them value we create, or the same thing we do in Ethiopia. We show value so that they think of, oh, okay, this is not just the currency. There is an entire value package that comes in, and that also helps us to run our government differently, or to govern differently in our country. And yeah, this is actually the two major things we do. We really try to educate and show the technology, and on the other side, we also work on the use cases and not only look at it from a technology perspective, but from a utility perspective. What value does it bring, and not just what complex mechanisms and algorithms are there behind.
All right, great. Thank you very much, Eva. I'll just leave the space to the audience now to not, take all the space up. So please go ahead.
Christoph, we may get back to you. We have now a question by Guillaume asking, do you have some smart contracts with associations or foundations? And how about the lobster name? Maybe, I don't know if either Guillaume or Eva wants to elaborate a bit on this idea of smart contracts so that everyone is following.
Yeah, I can probably cover the smart contract topic from the Cardano. We just recently launched our smart contract capability. We also launched it in different phases. At the moment, we have launched the Plutus. That's the new programming language that we will introduce. So the Plutus language. So everybody who wants to build a smart contract, and smart contract can be seen what is the best way to explain it to people who, so it can be seen if you think of an Uber and you don't need Uber as an organization anymore. You, instead of having the organization between the driver and between the person that wants to go from A to B, you don't need the organization who creates the app and runs the app and makes sure that the driver gets the money and that the person who drives actually pays the money. You can take this organization out and create a decentralized organization or a DApp which runs that automatically, which is coded and has all the things actually programmed in what Uber as an organization is doing. So this is on a very abstract level explained maybe. And but as you hear, it enables a lot of, it's a major, it will create many new business models and use cases based on Cardano and on other blockchains, of course, going forward. So that is one of the key strengths of a blockchain. And now coming back to Cardano, we just launched that functionality. At the moment, yes, we are building. We are focusing at the moment more on the companies that help us to scale and to allow other people to come in as well, because if you want to build a smart contract now, you have to know the Bluetooth language, and for that we have a pioneer program, etc. So we are in a very early phase, but always in the background we are developing or working on, we call it Marlowe, which is going to be a smart contract functionality or user experience, which is based on drag and drop. It's for people that are not a programmer and can maybe create their own smart contracts. It's going into this low code universe that is at the moment, we see that more and more happening in the technology field. And yeah, with that, we expect then the full adoption, so to say.
Thank you. We have more questions in the chat. One question by Virginie Guignard asking, how do you manage origin of funds and that economical ID are real people?
So what is important if you put data on a blockchain? It's also kind of the transactions we know from like previous blockchain or previous interactions we have. But in that transaction or in that record that you create on a blockchain, you have, we call it metadata, a metadata functionality. So if you go into a record in the blockchain, you can actually access it by a cryptographic key, or if you know the transaction or the wallet behind it, you can identify it, and otherwise you just can have a key to go into that information and get access to the metadata. And in this metadata, there can be your birth date. It can contain your, I don't know, some medical records of you. It can actually contain all personal data that you own at the moment on, I don't know how many records, maybe at your doctors and at your government. And if you travel, you give other people, and then Google owns a lot of data and monetize on them. So if we think further what this technology can do and creating an economical identity is, you can store basically every data in this record, and it's secured by cryptography. And the only person who has the key is actually you as the data owner. And of course, you need certain people that validate the data. The government has to say, yes, you are a French citizen, and kind of give a stamp as we know it, but in a digital way. And if you have your own wallet, as we call it, you can use that for whatever purposes you might need it. So in other ways, if you go now to, I don't know, a nightclub, for example, and the bouncer asks you for your identity, you show him your name, your birth location, the precise day and year, and then maybe even further information, but actually he only wants to know if you're over 18, and or in other countries maybe a different age, and this is what this identity can enable. You can choose what information do you want to give to other people, what to other institutions, and manage your data your own.
Arthur, you're the master of the time. My sense is that we have a few more questions, but maybe we keep them for the end of the seminar.
Because I think it's a great transition to Peter's presentation, actually, because I saw the question from Joost about what other uses can you see for blockchain in the field of philanthropy. And I think Peter's presentation is very speaking about that with a few different examples. So what I suggest is to keep your questions for after Peter's presentation. I would like to thank you, Eva, again for this initial talk. Peter, just briefly before giving you the floor, we have a second poll to send you, and it will pop up on your screen in a second. So the question we would like to ask you is, how confident are you about the overall positive social impact of blockchain and cryptocurrencies? Try to imagine, the future that Eva outlined in her presentation. Are you confident that blockchain will increase? We have an overall positive impact on for instance, the people it is supposed to help, especially people excluded from mainstream old world financial institutions and administration, like Eva mentioned. We have a few seconds left, so if you want to vote, 40 of you have voted already, and we will share the results in a few seconds. How confident are you about the positive overall impact of blockchain and cryptocurrencies? So I think we can close the poll and share the results. Okay, so I think, yes, we have a relatively strong majority of confident or very confident people in the audience. I think, 20% of people answered, I don't know. I think it's still very open, and I think it's great. It's a great transition again to Peter's presentation. Peter, thank you for being here. And I think you will share elements, from some of your recent research and publications about the topic, and especially the idea of crypto giving and surveillance philanthropy. So, Peter, very happy to listen to your presentation. The floor is yours.
Thanks so much, Arthur. So Arthur put a poll up at the beginning to help us think about how we should pitch these presentations. And there were 5 options there asking you to think about how much you've read around crypto, what sort of cryptos are you investing in. I'm going to pitch this, I think, at a 6th option, asking you to perhaps read a bit more, and perhaps then you might think a bit more critically about this, and you might not think that blockchain is such a good idea, especially in the non-profit sector. So this is going to be about a 20-minute presentation summarizing a recent article which was published in NML, Non-Profit Management Leadership Journal. It'll be a bit fast, I'm sorry. I know that probably the majority of the audience, English isn't the first language, but it's recorded, so hopefully you'll rewatch it. But it's based on a research project in part. It's part a state of field exercise looking at around 30 blockchain-based giving platforms and tokenized projects engaged in philanthropy. So it's not changing slide. There we go. Sorry about that. So why blockchain? It's hard times for charities globally. Charities are in a pickle. We've got lockdowns globally. It means that people aren't taking part in events. The London Marathon didn't run last year, normally raises tens of millions for charity. None of that is going to good causes. People are fearing an economic slowdown, and they're being more thrifty. They're not donating in the usual ways. COVID is coinciding with a general mistrust towards the sector generally. So whereas a global economic slowdown is observable, there's been a massive growth in the speculative investments around crypto assets. But let's just look at some of these trust issues that are affecting charities right now. So a report came out recently that was suggesting that trust in charities is at a record low following these ongoing scandals that keep popping up. Charities' sexual misconduct in places like DRC, over 200 abuse reports in charity shops over 5 years just in the UK. In the UK, there's constantly stories like this popping up in newspapers that charity bosses are receiving enormous salaries, way higher than even a lot of people in the private sector are receiving. So this is fueling a culture of mistrust. And crypto proponents are stepping up with their trustless technologies as a potential solution to this. So there's lots of newcomers in this space getting on the bandwagon of Bitcoin's ascent. And then there's also the super rich early adopters that just were lucky enough to have the foresight to think this could be a good idea. Why not invest a couple of pennies into an asset that could now be worth tens of thousands? So some, mainly larger charities then, to overcome the challenges of mistrust and donor apathy, are experimenting with blockchain and crypto giving platforms. So a blockchain is an append-only digital database. So we need to know. It removes the need for intermediaries like banks, traditional regulators to verify transactions. So it's the backbone of cryptocurrencies. But it can also be used to facilitate smart contracts. And these are smart contracts. These enable blockchain tokens to be encoded with conditions to control how transactions can take place. What could possibly go wrong? So using this technology, crypto giving platforms promise to empower donors with more control, more transparency and security in fundraising and aid provision. So such a donor-centric approach inevitably brings trade-offs, not difficult to imagine, for target beneficiaries and non-profits specifically. So I've tried here in this diagram to show what a traditional project funding mechanism looks like and what a crypto giving framework looks like. These are the sort of power shift that's happening. So you have the international NGOs in the middle under a traditional framing with all the power, and you have donors on one side and beneficiaries on the other, both with less power. With crypto giving, you're really empowering the donors to control where their money goes through these sort of transparency mechanisms and what I call surveillance philanthropy. And then you have a couple of crypto donation platforms. You could, I guess, put Cardano in there as well to look at that. So the radical shift in power relations enabled by crypto giving platforms, I suggest, could promote surveillance philanthropy, productizing the giving experience in the donor's interest, while bridling non-profits from meeting the complex and fluid needs of project beneficiaries. So in the paper, it focuses on several significant benefit trade-offs for non-profits that are buying into crypto giving and blockchain innovation in 3 ways. So these are donor engagement and fundraising, organizational governance, and provision of humanitarian assistance. And I'll run through each of these separately. So non-profits have always needed to balance restricted and unrestricted donations to fund projects. But this balancing in a trustless ecosystem can be more efficient, disintermediating and empowering for donors with crypto. But building partnerships held together by strings of code promotes a relationship where donor is always right. Donors who perceive the needs of beneficiaries in contexts agreeable to their own interests can guarantee nothing gets lost in translation. Funds flow unimpeded through a more limited cluster of intermediaries towards project beneficiaries, limiting the ability of nonprofits to tackle structural root causes of issues that might impact the donor's bottom line. So why are they doing it? Why would nonprofits sign up to this? Well, they need the money, which we've said already. And the donors we're talking about have historically rarely given to charity. The younger people, who are traditionally less likely to donate regularly to charity, are more likely to use cryptocurrencies. And this group is also far less likely to trust nonprofits or give spontaneously through direct charitable marketing appeals. All the data supports this. So we can see a couple of examples here, and you can see really how this is pitched towards younger audiences. Like Honu, the crypto kitty, this was an NFT that was sold for $25,000, an eye-watering sum back in 2018 when this was sold, and lots of people were like, it's a turtle cat. It's a picture that you're not even owning, you just own an NFT contract associated with it. But now, I mean, that's nothing, because, you know, we see NFTs that are being sold for 69.3 million. So there you are. So WildChain, it's trying to sort of bring in this gaming aspect to it, where you can win blockchain tokens, and it associates this sort of real world environmental data with a conservation crypto collectible. This is all the rage with the kids. So that's how they're sort of engaging with these new audiences that wouldn't traditionally donate. So once collected though, these resources, this money, it needs to be transferred to target projects. It needs to go where the money is needed. So this has all sorts of problems, but mainly the problems lie with the beneficiaries and partners that are working overseas. So transmitting cryptocurrencies directly to beneficiaries can encourage recipients to hold balances without converting to a more usable currency. This is what the blockchain developers would prefer. And I think Eva made the point that you know, as soon as they cash out into dollars, then the surveillance mechanism is no longer there. So it's best if you just keep it in the trackable format. And there's lots of organizations, lots of charities, local charities in Indonesia especially, that have been accepting crypto donations, but then instead of cashing out and actually spending it on projects, they keep it in the crypto asset in the hope that the value will ascend and the price goes up. The only thing is that it is then subject to this tumultuous market conditions where, like, for example, Bitcoin could halve in value in a couple of hours. It has done this twice in the last couple of years. There's also this problem, you know, around tax efficiency. So it's often sold by crypto developers that, you know, this is a really simple, efficient way to make your donations tax efficient. And there's some intermediaries, for example, LibraTax, they offer consultancy services enabling donors to transmit digital assets with the least possible tax liability. So when they promote this way of doing philanthropy, what they're suggesting is that the state, especially in the global south, is a corrupt entity. And therefore, you should try and disintermediate these corrupt government intermediaries as much as possible. And that has meant that in many poorer countries, they're not raising enough tax revenue as it is to fund even the most basic services. And the tax incentives in the global south, this report that was written by Christian Aid, was actually saying that actually in order to overcome the structural issues, the structural drivers of poverty in the global south, we need to have better tax systems, not systems that actually prevent tax from being collected. David Columbia, in his book, The Politics of Bitcoin, he makes this really sort of important claim about how game theory, that's sort of embodied within much of these crypto asset systems. It sort of implies that intermediaries are like leeches, they're parasitic. And he sort of draws comparisons between sort of right-wing anti-Semitism in the United States and the political foundations of a lot of these cryptocurrency projects. That, you know, the banker is a leech, and it should be taken out of the system altogether. So here's where the surveillance aspect of crypto giving becomes very apparent with projects like Aid Chain, Humanity Token, Promise Giving. So in Promise's white paper, it states that if a project falters or fails, the funds not yet released can be returned to you as a donor to be donated to a new project. So in this instance, donations, though cost effective and tax efficient for the donor, become highly conditional and inflexible for the recipient nonprofits. And I mean, what this means is that you have experts, actual experts working on the ground in disaster zones that know exactly what local people need. But unfortunately, their hands are tied by coded tokens that can only be spent in certain ways. And that money will be pulled back off the nonprofit and partner working overseas if they don't comply with the donors' restricted conditions. Give Crypto, which is affiliated with Coinbase, they have discussed a crypto donation platform designed to restrict the ability of nonprofits from cashing out above predefined allowances dictated by the platform. So this platform would essentially force nonprofits to adopt a pre-programmed token as a means of exchange instead of local fiat currencies, offering maximum transparency for donors and profit potential for platform developers, but all of the control is taken away from the local NGOs. So the other trade-off here is that by going after one target donor demographic, i.e. young people, you scare off others, the people who are not so technology first. There's lots of scams and frauds associated still with this space. So NFTs, for example, you know, heavily implicated in climate change because Ethereum is a proof of work blockchain, creates about as much CO2 every year as Nigeria, the whole of Nigeria. And a large percentage of that is now going towards the minting of NFTs. So actually people are like, well, maybe we shouldn't have anything to do with this technology. It's ruining society and the planet. Greenpeace are no longer accepting crypto donations on that basis. Sea Shepherd, we're working on Sea Shepherd. They still accept Bitcoin, but yeah, I'm working on that. But so there's also ISIS supporters are convicted of using 50,000 Bitcoin. China's Bitcoin crackdown sparks fears of dirtier crypto mining. We know that that's the case now. There was also a recent scandal a couple of days ago where a nuclear scientist working for a US, he was a US nuclear engineer, was blackmailing the government for using Monero, a privacy-preserving cryptocurrency. So there's lots of scams, and you're scaring away other target donors potentially. There's also a lot of use cases put forward around non-profit governance. So almost all the functions of charity regulators could be automated using smart contract blockchains. Everything from verifying the credibility of trustees to real-time reporting. So the issue here, though, is that ensuring confidentiality for non-profits is difficult. There's sometimes, well, as a saying in England, you don't want to air your dirty laundry in public. And sometimes you don't want the general public to know your state of your bank balance. But what you can easily do with a blockchain explorer like blockchain.net is you can put in their public address that they advertise, and then you can check exactly what Bitcoin donations are coming in and what payments are coming out. So in this example here, this is a large UK charity called RNLI. You can see that they, in this example, they haven't had a cash out since 2018. So in 2 years, they didn't cash out anything. As a donor, I'd be thinking, is this a waste of money? Have they lost the keys to this account? And am I donating my precious Bitcoin and it's just going nowhere? Anyway, so it's problematic. So yeah, there's these privacy preserving cryptocurrencies, as I said, like Monero, Dash, Zcash. However, the more anonymous nature of these cryptocurrencies presents significant challenges for KYC AML and regulating political organization fundraising and controlling the influence of dark money that's going into politics. So there's always a trade-off. Sorry. It can cause headaches for the charity, but also local partners. Bitcoin balances, for example, they can't so easily be shifted to a bank account in Peru compared to the UK. And that's the same as ADA, the same with Cardano. We say, oh, we can just easily transfer this and they can receive the money without paying 20% in fees. Unfortunately, they can't cash out as easy as you can in the UK. And this is an example from Coinbase. Coinbase claims that they're supported in over 100 countries. You can see that in the United Kingdom, same as France, you have all these options: deposit, PayPal, UK bank account. It's all fine. It's all fungible and liquid. I want to transfer Bitcoin to a small charity in Peru. I'm a trustee of this charity, LAC, and we did look into this. And in Peru, you can only convert. You can't cash out. They don't want it. There's no reason why a local partner would need this. They want cash. And if that means paying a small Western Union fee, which is like not very high, not 20%, then they would rather we have that option instead. So yeah, crypto assets are less fungible and therefore less useful in the global south. They're also being used for delivering humanitarian assistance. So finally, there's been a lot of interest in this technology from every major UN body, all of them. So in this example here, a coded token which can only be spent in certain shops has been used for the World Food Programme's Building Blocks initiative. So the wallet in this case is linked to your biometric data, so you don't have to memorize anything or write anything down. This obviously has massive privacy and privacy and vulnerability issues with vulnerable groups. So the World Food Programme's Building Blocks initiatives is helping the World Food Programme distribute cash for food aid to over 500,000 Syrian refugees in Jordan. Personal data, entitlements, and transaction logs are stored on the Ethereum blockchain, providing a virtual bank account and ID for each refugee. So the issue around this, obviously, is that such surveillance robs vulnerable people of their dignity. Imagine going into a local market and other people are fine, you can just pay with your cash and buy whatever you want. But as a refugee, you can only buy certain items in certain shops, and you have the indignity of having a camera flashed in your eyeball to prove that you are a legitimate refugee and that you do have the rights to buy things in that shop. So also you have to consider that sensitive, personally identifiable information for some of the most vulnerable people in the world is being generated and made accessible not only across agencies but also private contractors, inevitably introducing greater risk of data breaches. So we can see here that Passphrase has grabbed a 3.6 million contract to power privacy preserving online ID checks. I'm sure they're laughing all the way to the bank. Unfortunately, that's not the case for the most vulnerable people living in Syrian refugee camps. We also see that cash and voucher assistance is another potential use case for blockchain platforms. CVAs, they're very popular with recipients. So CVA programs give recipients a greater level of freedom to decide and meet their own spending priorities. Not so once blockchain's on the scene. So the unblocked cash tokens can be switched on and off in a way that cash systems cannot. The project implementer is empowered to define the temporal and spatial boundaries of any disaster event that would trigger the system to come online. So in this case, it uses XDAI. Aussie startup Sempo have bagged the contract working with Oxfam so they can provide these CVA programs in Vanuatu. But this is being scaled up. I mean, it's interesting when we talk about how blockchain developers and donors, they have the power to track constantly the recipient spending and where this money is going and what it can be spent on. So this is maximum freedom for people, for donors. They don't have to go through nasty, horrible tax men to give their donors. But at the same time, we're taking away all that economic sovereignty and freedom from the most poorest. It's leading a lot of people to think that this is actually just crypto colonialism. So in the Global South provides ideal real-world testing grounds for economic experimentation. So I started off this presentation with a few newspaper articles around scandals that charities are facing. What I'm arguing is that potentially with blockchain on board, we're just getting a whole new set of problems. And perhaps the answer, the real solution, is better regulation from human regulators to make sure that these scandals don't happen. Outsourcing to code is just going to lead to new problems, and perhaps those developers just need to go and find another sandbox and stop experimenting on the world's most vulnerable. So much of this technology, it constitutes an intolerably hot potato for the UK and France and the US. We can't set up digital ID systems and put them in private sector software companies' hands because the pushback would make those completely unfeasible. We can easily implement these in the Global South because we don't have that same kickback. In Ethiopia, this is a part of the world which is reeling from the aftermath of civil war. This is an excellent opportunity to implement these new blockchain fixes for these communities. So I'll leave you with one more example. So Give Directly and Own This Go, in order to identify potential recipients that are most in need of assistance and to evaluate impact, the organisation was suggesting that they monitor recipients' salivary cortisol levels using an oral swab test as a measurement of relative stress level. I think this just really goes to show that the level of indignity that the poorest people in the world are just meant to put up with, just to enable donors to have the transparency and tax efficiency that they desire, I think is completely immoral in a lot of ways. But in the UK, just like in France, just as in the US, 1 in 10 non-profits face bankruptcy. In the US, 1 in 5 donors have said they won't be giving until this is all over. And in that same context, we have a lot of crypto-rich individuals with a lot of spare cash right now. But I still think it's worth a little bit of critical thought before we engage in this space. If I haven't depressed you enough, then head on over to my website, codeforest.org, or follow me on Twitter at Peter J. Howson. And if you don't want to ask a question, then please drop me an email and we'll have a chat. Thank you very much for having me. I'll leave it there.
Thank you so much, Peter, for your presentation. When we prepared for this seminar, I thought it was a good idea to have an enthusiastic perspective and a more critical perspective. So I think it's a good balance, thanks to both of your presentation. Like I did for the first presentation, I would like to invite my colleague Christoph Müller-Block for maybe asking the first question to Peter, and then I will let my colleague Anne-Claire moderate the conversation with all of you for more questions to both our guests. Thank you.
Thank you, Arthur. And Peter, this was really an interesting overview of the trade-offs that society really as a whole might face when using blockchain in this particular context of charitable giving. And my question for you would really be something I'm really interested in. For you, having really spent a lot of time researching these trade-offs, where do you actually see the most potential for blockchain to provide actual value for charitable giving? Is there any area where you do see potential, or do you think this is really something that NGOs, for instance, should really stay away from because it's just too problematic?
Yeah, I mean, perhaps maybe I framed that a bit too simplistically in the talk. I mean, if we just say that NGOs broadly should stay away from this, I mean, there's some NGOs that don't have that luxury, and these are good NGOs that are doing good work. But for whatever reason, the work that they're doing doesn't suit the interests of the governments and other interests that are operating in those same countries. A good example, I think, is WikiLeaks. I think to some extent Greenpeace and Sea Shepherd as well. So, I mean, there's states in India, for example, that have completely frozen Greenpeace's bank account on several occasions and just said, we don't want you here. Sea Shepherd is still banned in several countries. And what crypto does potentially is allow them to carry on operating without needing those bank accounts. So, I mean, it's perhaps just selling, I mean, just donating Bitcoin to an organization which needs money and is operating with a frozen bank account somewhere. Perhaps that's a good enough use case for this. The only thing is that Bitcoin generates more carbon emissions each year than Argentina or Poland. So, I mean, there's always going to be trade-off. There's never a simplistic, you know, this is a good thing we can use. It's like, well, yeah, but then how do you justify that? And for Greenpeace, you know, that's like, we're a green organization. We can't just, you know, we can't have this. This is an intolerable contradiction for us. So, yeah, I mean, that's why I would say that this is useful.
Okay, thank you very much, Peter. And I mean, indeed, perhaps this is something that Eva might want to comment on the emissions of Bitcoin and how Cardano try to address this, right? To kind of connect the dots a bit. That could be quite interesting. But thank you very much.
Eva, do you have anything to add on this, question of the impact of ADA?
I think it's just a general note. What we've been, or what now we're discussing, is like something we looked at, I think, 3 years ago. So it's really around Bitcoin, energy consumption, cryptocurrency, volatility. We have moved, really, the market and the industry has moved, and there's like, we can look into cryptocurrencies, and those are very normal and very well-known issues or topics. But I think if we look at it, or at the topic in general, I think we should really focus on the technology and blockchain and not just cryptocurrencies. And therefore, when we look at the blockchain and the technology, energy consumption is like, with the challenge that we have launched now with the trees, we have a group of researchers and stakeholder operators. They have calculated what it would take that Cardano is carbon neutral with the energy consumption which we use, which is like, yeah, maybe a household or few to compare to Bitcoin and countries. And actually we already reached that, because they said if we have a 1 million tree challenge, 1 million trees that we aim to plant, we need a quarter to be neutral. I mean, of course, with those results, we don't, that's also why we don't communicate them, because it's always there are many parameters you have to look into. But it just gives you an example that this technology is way further than maybe the news from the last, and that's what I meant before. Every day is a new news and are new innovations coming in the market. And that's why it's a dangerous play to look into even 1 year, because we say in crypto, 1 year is 7 years in the normal world. And that has a reason, because it's developing so fast.
Thank you, Eva. Peter, was that a sign that you wanted to comment?
Yeah, I mean, it's just off the back of that, really. I wrote a paper. I just tweeted it if people are interested about in this, exploring the potential of blockchain for reforestation and forest protection projects. So check out the Twitter thread if people did want to read a bit more about that.
Great, thank you. So we have a few questions in the chat. So there was a question by Anton asking, I'd be interested to hear more about how does Cardano challenge the cash out problem? Basically, in order to use and benefit from a cryptocurrency, all the final recipients will have to be ensured that either it's accepted at the local markets or it can be cash out to fiat currencies. Is that right?
So we look into several things. What we heard also from Peter is there is a problem of volatility. It can, if companies or organizations or even states are invested in Bitcoin, it's a volatile market. But like, what is a cryptocurrency, or what does it help? We already have the stable coins, we call them. So stable coins is also a digital asset or a digital currency, which is linked to a traditional currency. But because it's digital, it's also traceable. So we look into things like that. And of course, also like volatility is always a problem for nonprofit organizations or for everybody who holds crypto. That's why most of the times for the people who are in there, they can handle it and they can get used to it. We see now the institutional investors, they hedge against it. But organizations that don't have that opportunity, they can either cash out, as we say it, but then it's not traceable anymore, or we find ways on keeping the traceability or the transparency intact. And what we look into is working also with mobile providers in those countries, because they have a really important, especially in Africa, a really important status, because still many people they use or they invest in, or how to say, they have a credit to use their phones, etc. So we see how we can leverage that, or as mentioned, we look how can we use other digital assets and or at least hedge the volatility and make sure that the traceability is given. So those are the major things we look into, but there we are at the very beginning.
There was also a suggestion by Virginie, I think, suggesting that multiple crypto ATM are best. Do you want to comment on that, Virginie?
Yes. You know, I know some people in Africa who has done cryptocurrencies to make people to have a better life, and they have searched a way for the people to have the money to have the money back, you know, in usual crypto, and their best solution was to have ATM, I don't know in English, ATM, and ATM. And I think it's the best way, because you know, you can send money, but the money, if you want this money to be useful for people on the field, just to pay food, to pay clothes and so on, you need them to have a connection with real life. So for this connection, you need ATM to make the connection between the donation in cryptocurrency or token or every kind of donation with digital, and the real cryptocurrency on the field, you know. Because if you have no connection between them, you are creating a closed economical, you see, system. And is it really useful to create that kind of system to help people? I don't. It is a question.
Eva, you want to comment on that?
So did I understand the question correctly? Is if an ATM is the best way to provide them access to cryptocurrencies? Is that
to address this cash out issue that Anton was referring to?
Yes, that could be. I mean, it really depends on the infrastructure, on the country, etc. I mean, at the moment, I think the ATM that I know, they are mainly used for Bitcoin, and so yeah, I mean, Peter mentioned Bitcoin is still, it's the first generation blockchain and cryptocurrency, and it definitely is the mother of all cryptocurrencies and the most used, and that's why I guess the question arises, or that's why probably in many countries people own Bitcoin because they are affected by high inflation and they worry every day what's happening with their own currency, and it offers an alternative. So that is totally understandable, but there is a cash out problem, and that really depends on how a system treats cryptocurrency. What is the underlying law? If there is the opportunity, I mean, if banks are allowed, and in many countries that's the case, if the banking system is also connected to crypto and they are allowed to hold crypto themselves, and or at least external companies can be in there, and you can trade, just exchange on a decentralized exchange or another exchange your cryptos into fiat, and then you have your bank account and you can transfer it to that. I guess that is the easiest way. And then the second part is the ATM. But yeah, for me that was always just a bit of a gamification, because the real value of a cryptocurrency is it's digital, and yeah. But if you can only pay in cash, and the government doesn't allow you to hold cryptocurrencies, or it doesn't allow the banking system to hold cryptocurrencies, then it's somewhere there.
Maybe I can add something. You know, most of the people on the field in Africa, because I know well Africa because we are in a lot of countries there, have no bank account, and they can't have bank account. That means they can't reach the donation directly, or they have to pass through a middle structure, you see. So if you want to be sure the donation is going to the real people, you have to be sure they can use the money directly. And now in Africa, they have other system like exchange with mobile phone, you know, but bank account for most of the people is a luxury, high level luxury, you see. So it is a problem to solve, I think, or to make a, you can make a deal maybe with an exchange platform, mobile by mobile, you know.
Yeah,
maybe.
No, that's a really good point. But we also have many local organizations coming and saying that giving people cash is also a very, very dangerous thing to do, because you don't know if you give it to the right person in the household, and for what is the money spent. And then many humanitarian organizations, then they just provide certain assets to people in need, for example, but maybe those assets don't really fit their real need. Maybe they need something to rebuild their house and not really food component, etc. So for them also the cash aspect is very, very tricky. And that's when we think of, okay, how can you somehow create a system where even if you give money, that it's tracked, or that the right person from the family gets the money, and you somehow have a proof for what it is spent. So that is then probably the next
yes, maybe, but I think
I'd like, Virginie, I'm sorry, there are a few other questions that I would like to give a chance to, and we are getting to the end of the seminar, but it's obviously, I think, a very important and valuable conversation. There was one question by Just asking, and maybe that's a question for Peter, are there ethical guidelines for blockchain use that are similar to the one that are emerging in the field of AI?
No. There's ISO standards around certain blockchain compliance. But, I mean, there's nothing to do with ethics. There's no internationally agreed ethical standards for blockchain platforms that I know of.
Would that help? I mean, would it be important to develop some?
I don't think you could. I mean, this is the thing. Sorry, I think, like Ava was saying, that this technology is imbued with game theory logic. Like it almost, wherever you try and regulate it, it pushes back. and resist regulation. I mean, that's the point of this technology. That's its use case. It disintermediates, so it removes intermediaries, regulators. So, and if you try and regulate it, something else prevents that from happening. That's what game theory is. It's a and for that reason, I think this is beyond that sort of approach, I think. And if we did use that approach, I think it would negate the entire use case for using crypto.
Thank you, Peter. There are a few more questions. There was one, I think, by Guillaume, a specific one, I think really targeted to Eva about, you know, a potential donation. So maybe I encourage Guillaume to directly connect with Eva to get a specific answer to it. I think it's important that we stick to a sharp end by 2 p.m. to, you know, let the speakers go on their own journey and then have everyone go back to their own activities. So Arthur, I will maybe hand it over to you.
Yes, sorry, I will share one more time our slides to end this seminar. Can you see my screen? Yes, I think so. Yeah, so we have just a few minutes left. I just wanted to thank again our two speakers, because we launched a lot of important conversations, and I hope that this seminar is only the beginning for some of you to continue these conversations further. I think in the chat we will share, if it's not done already, a few references. So I think my colleague Gaetan will do that for more about, for instance, Peter's articles. Eva, there are probably resources that you would like to share as well. And I also invite my colleague Christophe to share maybe a few links to some of his work on blockchain, if it's it could be also interesting as a way to continue educating ourselves about these issues. Yeah, I think there were important issues that were raised, and it's only the beginning of finding solutions to the issues that Peter raised, especially in terms of privacy, power asymmetries, carbon footprint. I asked a few questions potentially in the chat, related to how you can measure the footprint of cryptocurrencies, and compare between cryptocurrencies. It's quite well known that the ADA cryptocurrency has a lower carbon footprint in its proof of stake process when compared to the Bitcoin's proof of work. But I think we need more research in this area and also to compare it with the fiat currency's own carbon footprint. That would be a nice subject for a PhD thesis. Again, I would really like to thank Eva and Peter for taking the time to in their busy agenda to do this. Thank you to both of you. I think we have a few advertisement to do. So we are for those of you who speak French, we have our podcast called La Philanthropie en Question, which is available on all the major podcast platforms. We just recently launched the 6th episode. So the idea of this podcast is to translate in very understandable terms results from academic research on philanthropy, and it is moderated and created by my two colleagues Anne Monnier and Gaëtan Lefebvre. We also have a Twitter account that Anne-Claire mentioned. So if you want to stay in touch with our activity at the Philanthropy Chair, you can connect with us. And thank you if you use the live tweet function. I think we will also make the recording available on YouTube. So stay tuned if you want to have a link to see a replay of the seminar. Again, thank you very much to all of you. If I forgot something, let me know. I'm talking to my team. But Peter, Eva, a big thank you, and thank you also to Christophe for participating to the conversation. Our next Lunch and Learn seminar will happen in 2022. We are taking a little break to prepare for 10 years anniversary event in December. So stay tuned for new invitations, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks, Arthur, and everyone for inviting me. I'm gonna shoot off. I've got to do some teaching. But,
thank you so much, Peter.
Thank you, Eva, for your
Thank you,
talk.
Peter, as well. Thanks, everyone.
I'll see you at the next one.
Yes.
See you later.
Yes,
Bye.
bye. Good luck for all your projects.